for 10 years. While he smiled at our visitors, I trembled when I heard the key in the door. Go ahead and cry. Go ahead and moan, you crazy woman. Nobody will hear you, he would say as he squeezed my arms. Until one day, I learned that technology can also be a weapon in the hands of a desperate woman. Hello, my dear friends. What a blessing to be able to talk with you today. I'm Eleanor Thompson. I'm 72 years young and I currently live here in Scottsdale, Arizona. I ended up in this beautiful desert city after many twists and turns that life has taken me through. But I'll tell you more about that story a little later. Every morning after my coffee and cornbread, I come to my little office corner where I have my computer all set up to do what I love most. Editing videos for my channel of traditional American recipes. Just imagine a woman my age dealing with all this technology. My grandchildren are always amazed. Little Molly is always saying, Grandma Eleanor, you're better at YouTube than most young people. I started using these internet gadgets after I turned 60. Can you believe it? It was my daughter Rebecca who gave me a good smartphone and a laptop as gifts, saying I needed something to keep me busy after everything I'd been through. At first, I was afraid to even turn the devices on, but I learned little by little. First, I just sent text messages. Then, I learned to take photos. And before I knew it, I was editing videos, adding background music, creating effects, and everything else. It's funny how life comes full circle, isn't it? The very thing that once saved my life, a little cell phone recording in secret, has now become my passion. Every time I learn a new trick in these editing programs, I feel like I'm reclaiming a little piece of the time I lost. My hands sometimes shake a bit now. My eyes need the help of glasses. But each little video I post feels like I'm showing the world. Look, I exist and my voice deserves to be heard. From my apartment window in my office, I can see the street activity, children going to school, neighbors walking their dogs. There's a beautiful saguaro cactus right in front of the building that when it blooms is just the prettiest thing. Sometimes I film it too to put at the beginning of my videos. It seems like God himself painted it to remind us that after dark times, spring always comes. When I'm not at the computer, I'm in the kitchen preparing something delicious to record. I bet you'd love to try my apple pie, my mother's recipe, or my buttermilk biscuits that are so fluffy they're like clouds. On Sundays, my grandchildren come over for lunch. I have 3, Peter who's 12, Molly who's 9, and little James who's 4. They're the light of my eyes. Oh, but before I continue, I'd like to ask a little favor from you all. If you're enjoying my little chat, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps this grandmother continue telling her stories, and maybe help other people who've gone through what I went through. And tell me in the comments which town are you watching me from? Is it day or night where you are? Are you having a cup of coffee while listening to me? Or are you lying in bed? I'm curious to know who are the sweet angels who take time to listen to this old lady ramble on. Let's create a chain of affection. Agreed. My dears. Today I'm going to tell you a story that I've kept deep in my heart for a long time. It's not easy to talk about, but I think it's important to share with you, because I know there are many people out there living in the same hell that I lived through. And if my experience can light a little flame of hope in someone's heart, then it was worth it. We always think these things only happen to other people, right? That domestic violence is something from TV shows or the news. But I, Eleanor, who now makes videos, teaches recipes, and plays with my grandchildren, was once a woman who trembled at the sound of a key in the door. I was the one who smiled in family photos while inside I was falling apart. I was the polite neighbor that no one imagined was living a nightmare right under the roof that should have been her shelter. But before I get to that part of the story, I need to go back in time. Back to when I was just a dreamy girl in the rolling hills of Virginia, raised between the smell of apple blossoms and stories of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I was born and raised in Charlottesville, Virginia, a historic town of old houses and university traditions. It was 1953 and the world was very different from what it is today. I was the daughter of George Thompson, a small business owner who had a store on Main Street, and Elizabeth Johnson, a pie maker with magical hands. My mother made the best fruit pies in the region. Her apple pie was simply out of this world. I'm sure that's where I learned my love of cooking good food. We were a simple family, but we never went hungry. We lived in a little house with blue shutters with a big backyard where we raised chickens and had apple, cherry, and peach trees. In front of the house, my mother cultivated her rose bushes, which she tended with a care that I only came to understand later in life. Today, I know that those flowers were the small piece of beauty that she could control in a world that was so hard for women. I'm the oldest of 4 siblings. After me came Zachary, Dorothy, and the youngest, Benjamin, whom we called Benny. As the oldest sister, I learned early on to take care of the little ones. While my father spent all day at the store, and my mother juggled between the pies she sold on order and household chores, I looked after the children. By age 8, I was already changing diapers, giving baths, and telling bedtime stories to help them sleep. Our house was close to the Methodist church. Every Sunday we went to service, all dressed up in the best clothes we had. Dad was a religious man, one of those who didn't forgive a swear word or a mischievous prank. Fear of God and respect for your elders is what makes a proper man, he always said, and we believed it because in those days, a father's word was law. The games back then were so different. There was no such thing as cell phones and computers. Imagine that. We played hopscotch, hide-and-seek, and tag. I loved to play jacks, that game with small metal pieces that you throw up and have to catch before they fall. They said I had quick hands like a hummingbird. I also liked dolls. Mine were all cloth made by my grandmother, Martha. She sewed each one with a different dress, and I named them all. At school, I was studious. I attended Charlottesville Elementary, an old building in the center of town. I loved English classes and always got good grades on my essays. Mrs. Parker was always saying, "This girl has a future with words." Little did she know that one day, as an old lady, I would be telling stories to so many people over the internet. But not everything was rosy in my childhood. Around the time I was 9, I began to notice that my father's behavior changed when he came back from the store. During the day he was a quiet, hard-working man. But when he closed up shop and stopped by the corner bar to wet his whistle with friends, he came back different. His face would get red, his voice louder, and any little thing would become a reason for a fight. My mother had a code with us. When she noticed my father was coming home, altered as she called it, she would send us to our room or to the backyard. "Go play outside. I need to talk to your father." We knew it wasn't conversation. It was shouting, crying, and sometimes the sound of things breaking. The next morning, Mom would appear with dark circles under her eyes, sometimes with a bandage on her arm or a scarf around her neck. Even on hot days, she would smile at us and say everything was fine, that she had bumped into the door or fallen down the stairs. And we, in our childhood innocence, believed her or pretended to believe because deep down, even without really understanding, we knew something was wrong. Once, when I was about 10 years old, I hid on the stairs that led to the attic from where I could see the living room without being seen. I saw my father come in staggering, yelling that dinner was cold. My mother, always quiet, tried to calm him down. That's when he raised his hand. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't close my ears. The sound of that slap still echoes in my memory. When I looked again, my mother was sitting on the floor, her hand on her face, and my father pointing his finger at her. "If you open your mouth to anyone, it'll be worse. Who's going to believe you? Everyone in town respects me. You are nothing." Those words entered my little girl's heart like thorns. Right there on the attic stairs, I made a silent promise. I'll never let a man do this to me. Never. Irony of fate, isn't it? Life sometimes mocks our certainties. Life continued its rhythm in little Charlottesville. The festival days were the most beautiful when the town was all decorated. On the 4th of July, the streets were filled with colorful flags. There were parades, people in costumes, and lots of music. On those days, even my father was calmer, more like the man others saw in the store. Helpful, polite, full of stories. At school, I continued to stand out. When I was 12, Mrs. Parker called me after class and said I should continue studying after junior high. "You have the ability to go far, Eleanor. You could even be a teacher." I went home that day with a heart full of dreams. I told my mother, who smiled a sad smile. "That would be nice, my daughter. But you know how your father thinks. A proper young lady marries young and takes care of her family." And it was true. In those days in our little town, few people saw the point in a girl studying much. Most of my girlfriends were already learning to sew, cook, and keep house, preparing their hope chests for when it was time to marry. Girls' education stopped early, while some boys went on to study in Richmond, the capital. It was around that age that I became interested in technology, even though it was so distant from our reality. It all started when they inaugurated the first movie theater in Charlottesville. It was a small room with a noisy projector, but to me it seemed like magic. Seeing those images moving on the big screen, hearing stories that came from such distant places, I was amazed and thought, how does this work? The theater owner's son, Jimmy, was an educated young man who had gone to college in New York. During his vacations, when he came back, he would see me always at the door of the theater, curious. One day, he let me into the projection room and showed me how that incredible machine worked. I was enchanted with all those buttons, lights, and the sound of the film running. One day, we'll be able to see these images inside our homes on small devices, he said. I thought it was big city talk. Little did I know that that first enchantment with technology would lie dormant for decades. But one day it would resurface in a way that would save my life. It's funny how God plants little seeds along our path, isn't it? We only understand why much later. And so I grew up between the prayers at church, the classes at school, the fights at home that we pretended not to see, and the dreams I nurtured in secret. Dreams of someday leaving that town, seeing the world, and especially of being different from my mother, of not silently accepting the wrong things in life. Little did I know that I was about to enter adolescence, and that my destiny would take turns I could never have imagined. Adolescence arrived with all that confusion of feelings, the body changing, different thoughts, that desire to be an adult soon. In Charlottesville, a 15-year-old girl was already considered of marriageable age. While my friends dreamed of white dresses and big parties, I dreamed of books and distant places. I managed to convince my father to let me finish high school. But it was a battle. My mother helped me, saying that a more educated girl would find a better husband. That was the argument he understood. The truth is that she wanted for me what she didn't have, choices. It was in 1970 when I was 17 that I met Robert Williams. He arrived in Charlottesville to work at the newly opened First Virginia Bank. A young man from the capital, Richmond, with his 25 years well-pressed suit and manner of an important person. In our little town, a bank employee was considered an excellent catch. Mothers were already keeping an eye out, dreaming of making him a son-in-law. I remember our first meeting as if it were yesterday. It was the town's spring festival, the town square all decorated. He was with other young men from the bank when our eyes met. Unlike the local boys, he didn't stare at me or make jokes. He just smiled politely and nodded his head in greeting. That intrigued me. Days later, he appeared at my father's store. He bought a few things and made conversation, asking about the history of the town. My father, all proud to have the bank gentleman in his business, started chattering away. When Robert was leaving, he saw me arranging some cans on the shelf and commented, "Your daughter is very intelligent, Mr. Thompson. You can see it in her eyes." That different compliment, not about my appearance, but about my intelligence, really got to me. I had never heard a man talk like that. My father was a bit embarrassed, but I noticed he was proud, too. After Robert left, he even commented, "A refined gentleman, that Mr. Williams." In the following weeks, Robert began to frequent the store more, always polite, always with an interesting topic. He lent me books, novels, poetry, even one about the history of radio and cinema. He talked to me as if I understood everything. Asked me what I thought about the books, about life. When he asked my father's permission to take me to the movies, it was a revolution in the family. Dad initially hesitated. A proper girl doesn't go out alone with a young man, but Robert's status as a bank employee, and his respectful manner ended up convincing him. We went to the movies, but with my brother Zachary as a chaperone sitting 2 rows behind. The courtship was quick, just 6 months. Robert presented me with a world I only knew from books and magazines. He talked about New York, about Washington, D.C., places he had been. He said I was too smart to stay in a small town, that I had potential for much more. In our conversations, he always asked my opinion, made me feel important. How could I resist? When he asked me to marry him, my father couldn't contain his joy. A bank employee as a son-in-law. In our reality, It was almost like winning the lottery. My mother seemed happy, but one night when we were alone, in the kitchen, preparing sweets for the engagement, she held my hands and said softly, "Are you sure, my daughter? There's no need to rush." I, in my young woman's excitement, replied that I had never been so sure of anything. "He respects me, Mom." "He's not," like I didn't finish the sentence, but she understood. "Not like my father. Robert never raised his voice, never drank, was always kind." For me at that time that was enough to define a good husband. The wedding was in January 1971. A simple ceremony at the Methodist church, followed by a party in my parents' backyard. Robert had already rented a little house in Richmond where we would move. I was radiant with the idea of knowing the capital, of living in a big city. On our wedding night, Robert was gentle, patient with my inexperience. In the days that followed, as we packed our things for the move, he surprised me with small gifts. A book, a hair clip, a music box. Everything seemed perfect. Arriving in Richmond was a shock for me. So many cars, so many buildings, so many people in a hurry. Our house was in the Churchill neighborhood, an old area but well located. It was a simple house, but to me it seemed like a palace with all its rooms freshly painted, and a little backyard where I soon began to plant my rose bushes like my mother did. The first few months were adjustment. Robert left early for the bank, and returned late afternoon. I took care of the house, learned to get around the big city, made friends with the neighbors. Little by little, I got to know Richmond, its squares, its scores. I felt like a city woman, modern, married to a respected man. It was then that I began to notice the first changes in Robert, small at first. He began to question my spending at the market, saying I didn't know how to economize. He started commenting on my clothes, suggesting that some were too flashy for a married lady. When I talked about looking for a job, he laughed, saying that a woman's work is at home, that he hadn't married a factory worker. One day, coming back from the bakery, I met a neighbor on the street and stayed chatting. When I got home, about 20 minutes later than he expected, Robert was at the door, arms crossed. "Where were you?" he asked in a voice I had never heard before. I explained about the neighbor, and he replied, "Don't you have anything better to do? Gossiping in the street while the house is a mess?" I was so surprised I couldn't respond. The house was spotless as I always kept it. I tried to explain, but he went in, slamming the door. That night, we ate in silence. When I tried to make conversation, he responded with monosyllables. I went to bed with a lump in my throat, thinking that maybe he had had a bad day at work. The next morning, Robert was normal again, even affectionate. He apologized for his bad mood, said he was having problems at the bank. I accepted the apology, relieved. But that episode was just the beginning. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, Robert changed. The criticisms became more frequent. My food was never cooked right. My house arrangement was never satisfactory. My way of speaking, according to him, was too country and embarrassed him. When we received his bank colleagues, I began to police myself in everything. I spoke less to avoid using expressions from Charlottesville. I cooked in fear, following recipes to the letter that he brought. I cleaned the house 2-3 times to make sure it would be perfect when he arrived. Even so, he always found something wrong. Visits to my family in Charlottesville became rarer. There was always an excuse. Too much work at the bank, car trouble, an important meeting on the weekend. When I suggested going alone by bus, he would take offense. "You mean you prefer your family to me? What kind of wife are you?" The isolation happened slowly. First, they were comments about my friends. "That Maggie looks like a gossip. Helen dresses too vulgarly." Then they were complaints when I went out at the neighbor's house again. "What do you all talk about so much? You've already been to the market today. Now you want to go out again." At home, he began to control the phone, always answering first, asking who it was before passing it to me. When I answered, he stayed nearby, listening to the conversation. If it was my mother or my sister. Afterwards, he wanted to know every detail of what we discussed. One night, we were having dinner when the phone rang. It was a colleague from the bank, the wife of a colleague of his, inviting me to a baby shower. I accepted the invitation, excited about the possibility of getting out a bit. When I hung up, Robert was staring at me. "You're not going," he said simply. "What do you mean I'm not going?" "I've already accepted the invitation," I replied, confused. That's when he hit the table, making the plates jump. I said, "You're not going. You think I don't know what you women do at these gatherings. Bad-mouthing husbands, exchanging tips." Frightened by his reaction, I tried to calm him down. "It's nothing like that, Robert. It's just a baby shower for Susan. We're going to give presents to the baby, eat cake." He stood up, his face red. "Are you calling me a liar? You think I'm an idiot? I know very well what happens at these women's gatherings." That was the first time I felt physical fear of Robert. He didn't touch me, but his posture, his tone, his finger pointed at my face. It reminded me of my father on the nights he came back altered from the bar. I swallowed hard and lowered my head. "Okay, I won't go." The next day, he brought a bouquet of flowers. He apologized, said he was stressed with work, that he was afraid of losing me. "You're everything to me, Eleanor. I just want to protect you from this world, full of bad people." And I, young and inexperienced, believed him or wanted to believe, because it was easier than facing the truth. That's how in small steps, almost without realizing it, I entered a prison without bars. A prison made of fear, of isolation, of words that hurt more than slaps. And the worst, a prison where I myself became my own jailer, anticipating his reactions, changing my behavior to avoid conflicts, believing it was all my fault. In 1973, 2 years after the wedding, I got pregnant. I thought a child would change everything. That Robert would go back to being the gentle and attentive man I met in Charlottesville. For a time, it seemed to work. During the pregnancy, he was calmer, more careful. He fixed up the baby's room, bought fruits and vitamins for me, even let me talk longer on the phone with my mother. Rebecca was born in February 1974, a beautiful, healthy girl. In the first few weeks, Robert seemed enchanted with his daughter. He would come home from work wanting to hold her, told his colleagues, showed photos. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking we had overcome the difficult phase. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come, and that my little daughter, instead of being the salvation of my marriage, would become another instrument of control in the hands of that man, who each day more revealed himself to be different from the polite young man who charmed me at the spring festival. The arrival of Rebecca brought enormous joy to me, but also a new kind of prison. In the first few months, I lived to take care of her, breastfeeding, changing, rocking, all the time with her in my arms or nearby. Robert seemed proud to be a father, but soon began to use the girl as yet another way to control me. "You're not taking proper care of her," he would say when the baby cried. "Your milk must be weak. Look how skinny she is." I would despair, try to breastfeed more, stay awake at night watching if she was breathing well. The pediatrician said Rebecca was perfect, developing normally, but Robert insisted that I wasn't a good mother. When I asked for my mother to come visit us to help with the baby, he was firm. "Not necessary. You have to learn to manage on your own. Your mother will only get in the way and put ideas in your head." I cried in hiding, exhausted, without support, feeling incapable. Today, I understand that was exactly how he wanted me. Fragile, insecure, dependent. As Rebecca grew, Robert became more critical and controlling. When she started walking around 1 year old, he complained that we let her too loose. "This girl needs discipline, or she'll grow up spoiled like the children of today." I remember one day when Rebecca was almost 2 years old when she accidentally knocked over a glass picture frame. Nothing serious, just a child thing. But Robert was furious. He yelled at her, making the little one cower in fear. I intervened, trying to calm the situation. "She's just a child, Robert. She didn't mean to." He turned to me with a look that froze my soul. "Don't interfere. You're too soft with her. That's why she'll grow up with no limits." He grabbed Rebecca by the arm forcefully, and put her sitting in the corner of the living room in timeout. The poor thing cried softly, looking at me with those little eyes, begging for help. I felt powerless, torn between protecting my daughter and not contradicting my husband. That same year, 1976, Robert was promoted at the bank. We bought a bigger house in the West End, a more affluent neighborhood of Richmond. The house was beautiful with 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room, a garden in front. For those who visited us, the few he allowed, we seemed the perfect family. Beautiful house, successful husband, a beautiful daughter, dedicated wife. But inside those walls, the reality was very different. The promotion came with more pressure. Robert said that now as a manager he had an image to uphold. Everything had to be perfect. The house immaculate, meals at the right time, Rebecca always well behaved, me always presentable. It was at this time that the accidents began. The first was on a night after a dinner with bank colleagues at our house. When everyone left, Robert said I had been inconvenient by telling a story from my childhood in Charlottesville. You embarrass me in front of the regional director. I tried to argue that the director himself had found it amusing, had asked me to tell more about the town. Robert didn't want to hear it. When I tried to walk away, he grabbed my arm forcefully. I pulled, trying to get loose, and ended up falling, hitting my head on the corner of the table. A small cut, but one that bled a lot. Frightened by the blood, Robert completely changed. Suddenly, he was concerned. Careful. He took me to the bathroom, cleaned the wound, apologized 1,000 times. It was an accident. You know, I would never hurt you on purpose. You moved. I was just trying to talk. And I believed him, or pretended to believe, because it was easier than facing the truth. The next day, he brought flowers, a new dress, was affectionate. All week the pattern was established. Explosion, injury, remorse, gifts, period of peace. Then it all started again. The accidents became more frequent. A push that made me fall down the stairs. A plate that flew in my direction during an argument. A door closed on my hand. And always the same story. I was the clumsy one. I was the one who provoked him. I was the one who didn't know how to behave as a wife should. The isolation became almost complete. My parents only visited us on special occasions like Rebecca's birthday. Robert always found excuses for us not to go to Charlottesville. He answered the phone, opened the mail, knew my every step. If I needed to go out to take Rebecca to school or go to the market, I had a set time to return. 1 minute late, and it was interrogation for sure. One of the worst parts was the constant humiliation. You're getting fat. Your hair looks horrible. You don't know how to dress like the other managers' wives. Little by little, I lost all confidence in myself. I looked in the mirror and only saw flaws. I thought I was really lucky that Robert put up with me. In 1980, when Rebecca was 6 years old, the episode I will never forget happened. It was Robert's birthday, and I had prepared a surprise party, small, just with the closest colleagues from the bank and their wives. I arranged everything while he was at work, made his favorite cake, decorated the living room. Rebecca had made a beautiful drawing as a gift. When he arrived and saw the surprise, he smiled, greeted the guests, seemed happy. The party went well. After everyone left, as we were tidying up, Robert came to me with a closed expression. Who gave you permission to invite these people to our house? I was confused. What do you mean? It was a birthday surprise. And who paid for all this? The cake, the drinks, the food. Where did the money come from? From the grocery money you give me I saved over the last few weeks. He took a glass that was on the table, and threw it against the wall. The sound of breaking glass made Rebecca, who was playing in her room, come running frightened. Go back to your room, honey, I said, trying to stay calm. No, let her see. Let her see what kind of mother she has, Robert shouted. A woman who steals money from her husband to throw little parties. I didn't steal anything, Robert. I just saved a little each week to make you a surprise. That's when he approached me, his face contorted with rage. He grabbed my arms tightly, shaking me as he spoke through his teeth. Never do anything without my permission again. Nothing. This house is mine. The money is mine. You are mine. Rebecca began to cry, asking her father to let me go. He pushed me against the wall and turned to her. Stop crying. Go to your room now. The girl ran off, sobbing. I stood there leaning against the wall, trembling with the marks of his fingers on my arms. That's when Robert said those words for the first time. The words that would become his mantra in the years to come. Go ahead and cry. Go ahead and moan, you crazy woman. Nobody will hear you. And if they do, who will believe you over me? A respected bank manager or a hysterical housewife? That night marked a turning point. The mask had completely fallen. There wasn't even the pretense anymore that the accidents were really accidents. It was declared abuse. And the worst part, he was right about nobody believing me. When the next day I appeared with bruises on my arms, the neighbor asked what had happened. I told a story about having fallen while fixing a high shelf. She nodded, but I saw in her eyes that she didn't believe. Not in the fall, but that there was something wrong in my marriage. But nobody did anything. Nobody wanted to get involved. Rebecca began to sleep poorly, to have nightmares. At school, the teacher called for a meeting, saying she was withdrawn, frightened. Robert attended the meeting and convinced everyone that we were just going through a difficult phase. And I was nervous, and that affected the girl. He presented himself as the concerned father, the patient husband who dealt with an emotionally unstable wife. And so he built his version of reality for the outside world. I was the problematic one, the unstable one, the difficult one. He was the saint who endured me, who took care of me despite my problems. There was a moment around 1982 that I thought about running away. Pack Rebecca's things, take a bus and return to Charlottesville, to my parents' house. I got as far as planning, saving some hidden money, preparing a backpack that I kept at the bottom of the closet. But fear paralyzed me. Fear that he would find us. And I knew he would. Charlottesville would be the first place he would look. Fear that even if I managed to escape, I couldn't support Rebecca alone. Fear that he would use his money and influence to take my daughter away from me, claiming that I was mentally unstable. So, the years went by. Rebecca growing up in that toxic environment, witnessing the violence, learning to walk on eggshells in her own home, and I increasingly faded, more submissive, more convinced that there was no way out. It was in 1985, when Rebecca was 11 years old, that things got even worse. Robert started drinking. Not much, not to the point of falling down or becoming uncontrolled. It was a glass or two of whiskey every night, enough to make him looser, more aggressive, less concerned about hiding his true self. The nights became a terror. We never knew what mood he would arrive in. If the day at the bank had been good, we might have a quiet night. If he had faced some problem, we paid the price. I developed a keen sensitivity, could tell by the way the door opened, by the sound of his footsteps, if we would have problems that night. On one of those bad nights, when Rebecca was already in bed, he began to accuse me of looking at a colleague of his during a bank event the previous weekend. It was completely absurd. I barely knew who the colleague was, had merely greeted him out of politeness. The argument escalated quickly. He shouted. I tried to defend myself quietly so as not to wake Rebecca. At some point, he grabbed my neck, cornering me against the kitchen wall. He squeezed until I felt short of breath, while he whispered, "If I find out you've been flirting with any man, I'll end you. Understand? You are mine. Only mine." When he let me go, I fell to the floor, coughing, trying to catch my breath. It was then that I raised my eyes and saw Rebecca standing at the kitchen door, pale, trembling, with tears streaming down her face. Our eyes met, and in that silent moment, a promise passed between us. I needed to find a way out, not for me, but for her. That night changed something in me. Seeing the terror in my daughter's eyes awakened a determination that had been dormant. I couldn't continue like this. I needed to find a way out of that situation to protect Rebecca, to break the invisible chains that Robert had put on both of us. Little did I know that salvation would come years later in a way I could never have imagined through a technology that back in 1985 seemed like something out of a science fiction movie. The following years were like living in a minefield. Every step, every word, every gesture could trigger an explosion. Rebecca grew up in this environment, learning to be invisible when her father was home, to speak softly, not to disturb. She had become a quiet, observant girl, always alert. This broke my heart. In 1990, Robert was promoted again, this time to regional superintendent. His salary increased. We bought an even bigger house in a gated community. On the outside, we were the portrait of the successful American family. On the inside, we lived in a private hell. Rebecca was 16 at the time, a beautiful, intelligent, studious young woman. Despite everything we lived through at home, she stood out at school. It was as if books, studies were her refuge, her escape. She reminded me so much of myself at that age, except she had more opportunities. Robert, with all his control, at least didn't interfere with her studies. On the contrary, he was proud to have an intelligent daughter. It was one more trophy to display. It was in that year that what I call the last straw happened. On a Friday night, Rebecca asked permission to go to a birthday party of a school friend. Robert initially denied it, as he did with almost all her requests, but surprisingly, he later changed his mind. "You can go," he said during dinner, "but be back by 10:00. Not a minute later, Rebecca was radiant. It was rare to get permission to go out. She spent the whole afternoon getting ready, trying on clothes, asking my opinion. She chose a simple but pretty dress, Nothing exaggerated. At 700, a friend's father came to pick her up as arranged. At 9:30, Robert was already restless, looking at the clock every 5 minutes. At 9:45, he began to pace the living room. At 10:00 sharp, he positioned himself at the window, looking at the street. With each passing minute, I felt the tension increase. 10:05, at 10:15, I heard a car stop in front of the house. It was Rebecca arriving 15 minutes late. For any normal father. Nothing much for a teenager. But I knew it would be a problem. When she came in, smiling, flushed from dancing so much, Robert was already at the door, arms crossed. "What time is it?" he asked, his voice icy. Rebecca's smile immediately wilted. "I'm sorry, Dad. The party was so good that I didn't notice the time passing. It was only 15 minutes. She didn't get to finish the sentence. Robert advanced, grabbed her arm, and pulled her inside forcefully. I said 10:00. 10, not 10:15. Who do you think you are to disobey? Robert, please, I intervened. It was just a little while. The girl was having fun. He gave me a look that made me back away. Then you turned to Rebecca. What were you doing all this time? Huh? Were you with some boy? Is that it? No, Dad, we were all dancing. Clara's mother was there the whole time. Liar, he shouted, raising his hand. At that moment, something inside me exploded. I don't know where the courage came from, but I threw myself between the two, protecting Rebecca with my body. Don't touch her. I shouted with a voice that didn't even seem like mine. You don't touch her. Time seemed to freeze. Robert looked at me, astonished. Never in all those years had I shouted at him. Never had I imposed myself in that way. For a moment I saw confusion in his eyes. Then the anger returned, multiplied. Go to your room, he said to Rebecca without taking his eyes off me. Now my daughter hesitated, looking at me with terror in her eyes. Go, honey, I said softly. Go and lock the door. When we heard the bedroom door close, Robert grabbed me by the hair, dragging me to the living room. Who do you think you are to challenge me in front of my daughter? Huh? Who? What followed was the worst beating I ever took. Punches, slaps, kicks. At some point, I fell to the floor and he continued. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. Something inside me had broken, but something had also awakened. An inner voice said, this ends today. One way or another, this ends today. When he finally stopped, exhausted from beating so much, I was lying on the sofa with a swollen face, a split lip, pains all over my body. He leaned over me, panting, and said those words that I knew so well. Go ahead and cry. Go ahead and moan, you crazy woman. Nobody will hear you, and if they do, who will believe you over me? Then he walked away, took a glass of whiskey, sat in the armchair, and turned on the television as if nothing had happened. As if I weren't there, broken on the living room floor. I don't know how long I stayed there. Minutes, hours. At some point, Robert went up to the bedroom and fell asleep. I managed to drag myself to the downstairs bathroom. When I looked in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. My face was deformed by the blows, one eye already closing from swelling, dried blood at the corner of my mouth. It was there, in front of that unrecognizable reflection, that I made my decision. I was going to leave that house, take Rebecca with me, even if it was the last thing I did in life. I returned to the living room, moving with difficulty, and picked up the phone. With trembling hands, I dialed my parents' number in Charlottesville. After 3 rings I heard my father's sleepy voice. Hello, Dad. My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Eleanor, is that you, daughter? What happened? I opened my mouth to tell him, to ask for help, to say I needed to escape. But then I heard a noise on the stairs. Robert had woken up. In panic, I hung up the phone. He appeared at the living room door, eyes half closed from sleep. Who was on the phone at this hour? Nobody, I replied, my voice trembling. Wrong number. He stared at me for a moment, suspicious, then went back upstairs. I stood there paralyzed, my heart beating so hard it felt like it would come out of my mouth. My chance to ask for help had been lost. I realized I couldn't trust anyone from outside. I was alone in this. The next day, Robert acted as if nothing had happened. He went to work normally, leaving me to explain my swollen face and bruises. I told Rebecca I had fallen down the stairs during the night when I went to get water. She pretended to believe, but her eyes said she knew the truth. When she left for school, I locked myself in the bedroom and cried like I hadn't cried in years. They weren't tears of pain or fear, but of frustration, of anger. Why couldn't I get out of that situation? Why was it so hard to simply take my daughter and leave? The answer came with painful clarity because he was right. Who would believe me? He was Robert Williams, superintendent of First Virginia Bank, a respected man in the community, in the church, in the club. I was just the wife without a profession, without my own money, without witnesses. It would be my word against his and I would lose. I would lose everything, including Rebecca. It was in this moment of absolute despair that I had an idea. If nobody would believe my word, I needed proof, something nobody could deny. A silent witness, but incontestable. The following week, during a trip to the mall, one of the rare occasions when I could go out alone, I went into an electronics store. I wanted to see the cassette tape recorders. I had thought about hiding one in the bedroom, recording the screams, the threats, the sounds of the aggressions. As I looked at the devices, a young salesman approached. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I nervously explained that I wanted a small recorder, easy to operate. I didn't tell him what for, of course. I said it was to record recipes while cooking. "Have you considered using a camcorder? There are some portable ones now that record image and sound," he suggested. The idea left me breathless. Image and sound, much better than just audio. But the devices were expensive, too big to hide, and I had no money. I left the store discouraged, but with a seed planted. I needed visual proof. Something that would show the world who Robert Williams really was inside the house. Something that would make people believe me finally. In the days that followed, this idea wouldn't leave my head. How to get this proof? How to record what happened without him noticing? It seemed impossible. I had no money, no technical knowledge, no allies, but I had determination. And for the first time in many years, I had hope. A fragile, small hope, but one that kept me awake, planning, thinking of every possibility. I still didn't know how, but I was sure of one thing. That night of terror had been the last. One way or another, I would find a way to expose the truth, to show the world the beast that lived hidden behind the mask of the respectable banker. And when that day came, neither heaven nor hell could save him. That night, lying in bed next to the man who had destroyed my life for almost 20 years, I made a silent promise to myself and to Rebecca. We're getting out of here, and when we leave, it will be to never return. The following years were a vigilant waiting. After that terrible night, something changed inside me. I continued to be obedient, quiet, pretending submission. But inside, I was always alert, observing, planning. Like a prisoner who studies the guard's movements, I studied Robert, his patterns, his routines, his triggers. Rebecca graduated from high school, and to my surprise and relief, Robert allowed her to go to college. Of course, it had to be enrichment living at home, but it was better than nothing. She chose computer science, something that made her father proud. Future course, as he said. For me, it was like a sign of destiny. In 1996, when Rebecca was in her third year of college, she began to bring work home. She used the computer that Robert had bought for the family, actually for himself and for her work. I, who barely knew how to turn on that machine, began to take an interest. When Robert wasn't around and Rebecca had time, she taught me little basic things. How to turn it on, how to open programs, how to navigate that dial-up internet that was just starting. "Mom, you need to learn this," she would say. "The world is changing. Soon everything will be done by computer." I smiled, pretending it was just curiosity from a bored housewife. But inside me, each new bit of knowledge was a small victory, one more brick in the construction of my liberation. In 1998, Rebecca graduated. Robert gave a huge party inviting important people from the bank, professors from the university. He strutted around presenting my daughter, the computer scientist. That night, watching him exhibit Rebecca like a trophy, I thought, enjoy it while you can. It won't last long. Rebecca got a job at a technology company in Richmond. She earned well, had her own money, but Robert insisted she continue living with us. "It's not safe for a young woman to live alone," he said. The control continued even though she was an adult. In 2002, the big change came. The company where Rebecca worked opened a branch in Boston and invited her to be part of the team. It was an incredible opportunity, which meant a much better salary and career growth. But it also meant leaving home, leaving Robert's control. The fight was ugly. Robert yelled, threatened to cut ties, said she was being ungrateful. For the first time, I saw Rebecca confront him directly. "I'm going to Boston, Dad. It's my career, my life. I'm not asking for permission." Her courage filled me with pride and gave me even more determination. Before leaving, in a moment when we were alone, Rebecca held my hands. "Come with me, Mom," she whispered with tears in her eyes. "Let's get away from here." My heart broke as I refused. "I can't yet, honey. He would come after us. You know that. I need to find a better, more definitive way." She understood, although reluctantly. On the day she left for Boston, she hugged me tightly and said in my ear, "I'll send you money every month. Keep it hidden, one day you'll need it." And so it was. Every month I received a call from her on the house phone. Always when Robert was at work. She would tell me about Boston, about her job, and at the end always say, "I sent a little gift for you. It should arrive in a few days." It was the code for the money which she sent through a carrier, a colleague from the company who regularly traveled to Richmond. Little by little, I gathered a small escape fund, as I mentally called it. I hid the money inside an old Bible whose middle pages I had cut out. Robert never touched books, much less the Bible. In 2004, another stroke of fate came. Robert was diagnosed with high blood pressure and the doctor recommended that he reduce stress, that he delegate more responsibilities at the bank. This made him even more irritable, more controlling at home, as if he needed to compensate for the loss of control at work. The episodes of violence, which had decreased a bit after Rebecca's departure, returned with force. Any little thing was reason for an explosion. The difference was that now I wasn't so afraid anymore. The hidden money gave me a feeling of power that I had options. In December 2005, Rebecca came to spend Christmas with us. She was different, more confident, more beautiful, stronger. She brought presents for both of us. For Robert, an expensive tie for me. A little box wrapped in red paper that she discreetly handed me when he wasn't looking. "Only open it when you're alone," she murmured. That night, while Robert watched television in the living room, I locked myself in the bathroom and opened the present. It was a cell phone. Not one of those simple ones just for making calls, but one of the first smartphones with a camera and everything. With it was a note, "So you can always call me and for other emergencies. It already has credit. I love you, Mom." I looked at that device as if it were an alien. I barely knew how a regular cell phone worked, let alone that sophisticated thing. But inside the package, there was also a small piece of paper with basic instructions handwritten by Rebecca. How to turn it on, how to turn it off, how to put it on silent, how to use the camera, how to send a message. I hid the cell phone inside my Bible safe, and spent the following days studying the instructions. When I was alone, each day I learned a little more. I discovered that I could film. That lit a light in my head. It was the proof I needed. But I couldn't be hasty. I needed to plan carefully. In the months that followed, I practiced in hiding. I learned to turn on the camera quickly to position the phone so that it captured the environment. Well, to send the videos to Rebecca's number, which was already saved in the contacts. In July 2006, Rebecca came to visit us again. During her stay, in a moment alone, she taught me more about the cell phone. She showed me how to send messages to multiple contacts at the same time using group SMS. A function that some more modern cell phones already had at the time, and added herself, her best friend, Elisa, and a lawyer friend of hers, Thomas. "If you ever need urgent help, Mom, just send a message or video to this group," she explained. "We'll be ready to act." The plan was beginning to take shape, but I still hesitated. What if he discovered the cell phone? What if the recording didn't work? What if, even with the proof, nobody did anything? It was in September 2006 that I was sure I couldn't wait any longer. Robert came home agitated after a difficult day at the bank. He started by criticizing dinner, then moved on to the old insults. I was fat. The house was dirty, I was good for nothing. When I tried to defend myself, saying calmly that I had spent the day cleaning, he threw the plate on the floor. "Are you answering me back? Since when do you answer back?" he shouted, advancing towards me. At that moment, I thought about the cell phone hidden in the Bible in the bedroom. I thought about Rebecca in Boston, waiting for my signal. I thought about the 35 years I had wasted in that prison marriage, and I decided it would be that night. After cleaning the kitchen, I went up to the bedroom. Robert was already there, sitting on the bed drinking his usual whiskey, watching television. I discreetly took the cell phone from the Bible, and hid it in the pocket of my robe. Then I began to arrange some things on the nightstand, beside the bed, so that I could position the device, partially hidden behind a book with the camera pointed at the room. "What are you arranging there?" he asked, irritated. "Nothing, just organizing my medicines," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm, although my heart was racing. When I finished, I sat in the chair near the window and picked up some embroidery, pretending to work on it. I knew it was just a matter of time until he started again. It didn't take long. First came the complaint about the noise of the needle in the fabric. Then about how I was wasting time with nonsense. When I didn't respond, he got up, threw the empty glass on the bed, and came towards me. "I'm talking to you," he shouted discreetly. I stretched my arm and pressed the record button on the cell phone, as I had practiced so many times. What followed was the usual script. Him yelling, calling me useless, crazy, threatening. I for the first time didn't lower my head. I looked him in the eyes and said, "You have no right to treat me like this." It was like lighting a match in a barrel of gunpowder. He grabbed me by the arms, shaking me violently. "I have the right to do whatever I want. Who do you think you are?" He lifted me from the chair and threw me on the bed. I stayed there, huddled, while he continued shouting, walking from one side of the room to the other, gesturing, threatening. That's when he said once ago that phrase I knew so well. "Go ahead and cry. Go ahead and moan. You crazy woman. Nobody will hear you. And if they do, who will believe you?" It was at that instant that the cell phone emitted a beep, a small sound, almost imperceptible, but which in the silence that followed the shouting, sounded like a bomb. Robert stopped, looking around. What was that noise? My blood froze. He looked at the nightstand and saw the cell phone, the recording light blinking. "What is this?" he asked, slowly approaching. I jumped from the bed, trying to reach the device before him, but it was useless. He got it first, looking at the screen with an expression that went from confusion to shock, and then to pure fury. "You were recording me. You were recording me." I saw in his eyes that this would be the worst beating of my life. Perhaps the last. But instead of fear, I felt a strange calm. Even if he broke the cell phone, even if he hurt me, I had managed to press the send button while he was shouting. The video was already on its way to the group. He advanced towards me, the cell phone still in his hand, his face contorted with hatred. "You're going to regret this." He didn't finish the sentence. His gaze fell again on the device's screen, and he stopped. Horror took over his face when he realized that the video wasn't just recorded, but already sent. My last action before he took the cell phone had been to press send to group. "What have you done?" he asked, his voice now lower, almost a whisper. "Who did you send this to?" I straightened my shoulders, feeling a strength I didn't know I had. "To my daughter, to a friend, and to a lawyer. You just exposed yourself to the world, Robert. It's over." He was paralyzed for a moment, as if he couldn't believe it. Then he threw the cell phone against the wall with all his might, shattering it. He advanced towards me, but I was already running to the bathroom. I locked the door seconds before he hit it with his body. "Open this door, open it now," he roared, pounding on the wood. "It's all recorded, Robert," I shouted back. "If you hurt me now, you'll only make your situation worse. They're already coming." It was a bluff course. Nobody was coming yet, but it worked. The blows on the door stopped. I heard him walking from one side to the other, cursing, then the sound of drawers being opened and closed violently. I stayed locked in the bathroom for almost an hour, trembling, praying, waiting. At some point, I heard the front door slam, then the sound of his car leaving at high speed. Even so, I didn't come out. What if it was a trick? What if he was waiting outside? Finally, late night, I heard the house phone ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it stopped. Minutes later, it started again. 6, 7 rings. It stopped again. On the 3rd cycle of rings, I understood. It was a signal. Someone, probably Rebecca, was trying to tell me it was all right. I cautiously left the bathroom, confirming that the bedroom was empty. I went down the stairs on tiptoe, looking at every corner. The house was deserted. When the phone rang again, I answered. "Mom." Rebecca's voice was breathless with concern. "Thank God." "Are you okay? Did he hurt honey?" I replied, my voice still trembling. "Has gone. We saw the video, Mom. Thomas is already taking measures. Don't stay there. Take the money I sent you and go to a hotel. I'm taking the first flight to Richmond tomorrow morning." I followed her advice. I took the hidden money, some clothes, and called a taxi. I asked to be taken to a hotel downtown far from our neighborhood. Upon arriving in the room, I locked the door, pushed a dresser against it, and for the first time in decades, slept without fear. The next morning, Rebecca arrived with Thomas, the lawyer. He had already initiated the procedures: a restraining order against Robert, divorce process, domestic violence complaint. The video, even short, was incontestable proof. "He will never lay a finger on you again, ma'am," Thomas guaranteed. "And he will pay for everything he did, both in justice and financially." A week later, accompanied by police officers, I returned to the house to get the rest of my things. Robert wasn't there. I later learned that he was at his brother's house, hiding from shame. The man who for so many years terrorized me with his presence now fled from mine. 3 months after the incident in December 2006, the divorce process was well advanced with all terms practically settled. The final officialization came in January 2007 along with a considerable compensation and alimony. The video never went public. We didn't want that. But its existence was enough for Robert to accept all terms. During those turbulent months between the incident and the finalization of the divorce, I received the sad news that my father, already very ill, had passed away. My mother, who already suffered from heart problems, couldn't bear the loss and passed a few weeks later. It was a hard blow, but in a way, I felt relieved that they didn't have to witness the painful process of my divorce. His reputation, his career, everything would be destroyed if those images came to light. That's how, my dears, after 35 years of abuse and fear, I reclaimed my freedom. With the help of my daughter, a cell phone, and the courage that I discovered I always had within me. The technology that I use today to make my recipe videos was the same that once saved me from hell. After the divorce came through in January 2007, I stayed a few months living with Rebecca in Boston. It was a period of healing, of rediscoveries. At 53 years old, I was finally free to start over. At first, I confess it was scary. I had spent so many years being controlled that freedom seemed like a foreign territory full of unknown dangers. Rebecca was my guardian angel during this phase. Patient, she taught me to live in this new world that I had missed keeping up with. She took me to doctors. I discovered I had high blood pressure, probably the result of so many years of stress. She encouraged me to go to therapy, something that in my time was viewed with suspicion, but which was fundamental for my recovery. Little by little, I found myself in this new life. The compensation and alimony from Robert gave me financial security, but I wanted more than that. I wanted to feel useful, to have a purpose. That's when I began to take a deeper interest in technology. "Mom, you have a knack for this," Rebecca would say, seeing how quickly I learned to use the computer, the internet. What began as necessity, that cell phone that saved me, turned into curiosity and then passion. In 2008, I decided it was time to have my own space. I loved my daughter, but I needed to follow my own path. I didn't want to return to Richmond, where the memories were too heavy, nor to Charlottesville, where my parents had already passed away. That's when I remembered Scottsdale. I had gone there once years ago on a rare family trip, when Rebecca was little. I was enchanted by the city with its beautiful landscapes, its tranquil climate. It seemed the perfect place to start over. I bought a small but comfortable apartment in a secure complex. In the first few months, I felt a bit lost, not knowing anyone. Gradually, I got to know people. I met Margaret, my neighbor from apartment 214, a widow like me. Well, not exactly like me since I'm divorced, but anyway. She introduced me to the water aerobics group at the complex, and there I met other women my age. Helen, Barbara, Gloria, each with her story, all welcoming me without judgments. It was Margaret who encouraged me to use the internet, not just to communicate with Rebecca, but to learn new things. There's everything there, Eleanor. Recipes, craft classes, language courses. It's a world, she would say, having learned to use the computer from her grandson. I began to research traditional American recipes, my specialty since the days I helped my mother. Apple pie, fried chicken, cornbread, chocolate chip cookies. I made them for my new friends who always praised them. "You should teach classes, Eleanor," they suggested. The idea kept hammering in my head. In 2010, when Rebecca came to visit me, I commented about this. She had a better idea. "Why don't you make videos, Mom? Teach recipes on the internet. There are many people who would to learn traditional American cooking." At first, I laughed at the idea. Me, a 7-year-old lady making videos for the internet. But the more I thought about it, the more the idea appealed to me. It would be a way to keep active, to share my knowledge, to connect with people. Rebecca helped me get started. She bought a good digital camera, taught me how to use it. We set up a corner in my kitchen with good lighting. My first video teaching how to make apple pie was a disaster. I stuttered, forgot what I was going to say, looked at the camera with a scared face. But I didn't give up. We recorded again and again until it was good. Rebecca edited it, teaching me each step, and we published it on YouTube. To my surprise, the video had hundreds of views in the first week. The comments were affectionate. People asking for more recipes, praising my way of explaining. That gave me a purpose. With each video, I improved, felt more comfortable. I learned to edit by myself, to include music, to add captions. The channel grew slowly but consistently. Grandparents' Tales became my little life project. In 2011, Rebecca told me she was dating Michael, a colleague from the technology company. He was a good, respectful young man who treated her as she deserved. In 2012, when Rebecca married Michael, a colleague from the technology company, I had the joy of helping prepare the desserts for the party. Some guests recognized me from the channel. It was a strange feeling, but a nice one of recognition. The couple was already expecting their first child, my little grandson, Peter, who would be born in early 2013. In the following years, life got better and better. The channel grew, my technology skills too. Rebecca had children, my dear grandchildren, Peter in 2013, Molly in 2016, and the youngest, James in 2021, even living in Boston. They come to visit me regularly. They are the light of my life. About Robert, I knew little. After the divorce, he retired from the bank and went to live in rural Pennsylvania from what I was told. I never saw him again, nor do I want to. I forgave because carrying hatred only harms ourselves, but forgetting is impossible. The scars are there, invisible, reminding me of what I went through and the strength I discovered I had. Today at 72 years old, I look back and see how far I've come. From the dreamy girl from Charlottesville to the woman prisoner, in her own marriage until becoming this independent lady who teaches recipes on the internet and has thousands of subscribers on her channel. Who would have thought, right? My apartment in Scottsdale has become my refuge, my little corner of peace. My Heblé plants on the balcony, my filming equipment in the office, my special pans in the kitchen. I have friends, I have my daughter and my grandchildren. I have freedom to come and go, to say what I think, to be who I am. Sometimes when I'm editing a new video, or responding to comments from my followers, I still find it funny to use these internet words. I catch myself thinking about the irony of life. It was technology that saved me from that prison marriage. And it is technology that today gives me joy and purpose in old age. That cell phone hidden behind the book on that September night in 2006 didn't just save my physical life. It saved my soul, my future, my chance to be happy, and every time I turn on the camera to record a new recipe, it's as if I'm celebrating that liberation, that rebirth I had at 54 years old. Life is just like that, my dears. It's never too late to start over, to find your voice, to be happy. If this lady here with little education and so much back pain could do it, anyone can. Just don't give up. Never give up. My dears who have followed me this far. If there's one thing I want to leave with you, it's this. Never ever under any circumstances believe when someone says you have no value or that nobody will believe you. That's the weapon of those who want to control us, diminish us, imprison us. I learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our ability to start over each day. At 54, when many think life is ending, mine was just truly beginning. My wrinkles are maps of survival. Each one tells a story of pain overcome. Life taught me that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never goes out. For so many years, I lived in the shadows, believing there was no way out, that my fate was sealed. But deep down, a spark of hope always remained lit, waiting for the right moment to turn into flame. I never allowed my dignity to be stolen. Even when they tried to take everything from me. Even in the worst moments, when bruises marked my body and cruel words cut my soul. Something inside me knew that I was more than that I deserved more than that. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine. Especially when we think we can't take it anymore. At the moment that seemed to be the end, I found courage I didn't know I had. And you also have that strength within you. Believe it. If you are living in a situation of abuse, be it physical, psychological, or emotional, know that there is a way out. You are not alone. Seek help from authorities in your area, from organizations that protect victims of violence, from trusted people. Plan your exit carefully, as I did. Gather evidence if possible. The technology that surrounds us can be a powerful ally. My dear hearts, just look at me. A lady who at 54 barely knew how to turn on a computer, and today at 72 has a channel on the internet. If I managed to turn my life around, you can too. No matter your age, your situation, your past. And now I need to make a special request to you all. As important as the breakfast we have every morning. Subscribe now to the channel and activate that bell. Each subscription is like a hug you give me. It's what gives me strength to continue sharing not only my recipes, but my story of overcoming. Share this video immediately with someone you think needs to hear this story. This video might arrive just at the right time to save the life of a person who is suffering in silence. Just as I suffered for so many years, a share can be the beginning of someone's liberation. And in the comments, I want you to write the word courage if you watched all the way through. Just that word. I want to know who really listened to my story to the end so I can thank each one from the heart. Do it now. Don't wait even one more minute. Life is too short for us to postpone our happiness and our freedom. This channel isn't just about tasty recipes. It's about new beginnings, about hope, about never giving up. Thank you for listening to me. May God bless each one of you. This is Alalan R. Thompson from Scottsdale, Arizona saying, it's never too late to be happy.